Well, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me. I really do appreciate it. Um, One of them
Of
days
course.
seems like it's like I looked at the track listing and listened to the soundtrack for this, and it is one of the longest list of songs I think I've seen for a film in a good long while. Like,
Thank
how
you for
packed
noticing.
how packed is this movie?
It's got a lot of music. I mean, what less could be expected of an Issa Rae production? Of course, she's known for using music all over the place. So yes, of course, music was a big factor in creative for this. Also have some scenes that are like party scenes. So some of the music is sort of playing at a party. So it's not all featured, but most of it is actually quite featured. So yeah, it was an insane undertaking. We had a really, really, really short schedule. So just knowing how much music, I actually was just looking at the same thing and I was like, wow, there's like 19 tracks on here. And we had basically 3 months to do the whole thing. So
As a music supervisor, like how far in advance do you usually get, or is this sort of par for the course?
it depends, it depends on the project. I actually was involved with this project for over a year because I work at Raedio, which is a sister company of Hooray, which is one of the producers on the film. So I have been looking at this script since like 2022. So, and music conversations started back then. So there was a long runway leading up to the takeoff, but then a very short flight and landing. For this, I actually was involved quite early. But generally, we prefer to be brought in like in the script stages. So before anything has been shot, even before prep on production is, so we can advise on anything that's in the script or might be on camera. But oftentimes we're brought in days before something musically is going to be shot. Like, oh, surprise! Oh, crap! We have a music moment. Like, we need somebody. Sometimes we're brought in like during production, and sometimes we're brought in when the whole thing is wrapped and they're just in post and they realize that they need somebody to deal with the music in the production. So it really just depends on the project.
It's really interesting because one of them days is one of looking at the track listing and listening to the soundtrack. It it's very modern and timely in terms of like the artists and songs that are featured, but that feels almost like it's a throwback at this point, given how many films and TV series, use needle like catalog needle drops from, the past. Is it that it's sometimes easier to get those songs than it is to get songs that are currently, on the radio? Or is that just like directorial choice?
No, it's not necessarily an easier to get catalog songs. They tend to cost more, actually. They might be easier to clear as far as like there aren't so many writers and publishers and labels involved, but they aren't necessarily easier to get. But we do have some throwbacks in there. We have the Jackson Sisters, we have an OJ's song. So we definitely wanted it to feel timeless, and we do, but we also wanted to make sure we were focused on music of today, music from LA artists, and then we wanted to have like a few throwback jams in there too. So the thought behind it had nothing to do with the ease of getting any of the songs because they certainly weren't easy. They weren't easy to get. Um, we had a lot of, there was a lot of back and forth as far as getting songs cleared, and it was like I said, it was definitely thrown into the deep end, and we had to do it all really quickly, which just makes it harder. But our creative thought process around this, centered around a few things. Like, Friday was a strong guiding light for us for the film. The film is similar in feel to Friday, and which is obviously a classic. And so that soundtrack had a sort of timeless feel with current tracks plus throwbacks. And then we wanted to make sure, because LA is a character in the movie for sure, we wanted to focus on and shine the light on some LA artists. And then we just wanted it to be super fun and funny. So those were our main voices, guiding lights, and then we also wanted to make sure we showcased a good amount of female talent in there as well.
I love the fact that like Friday, like kind of an interesting guiding light in that there is an Ice Cube song on there, which ties
Mm,
into the LA thing as well.
yeah,
Now, you've worked on a lot of projects over the last decade or so, and I find it really interesting, like your work for Justified City Primeval,
yeah,
because that's another program. That's a TV series, but it
mm,
features a lot of music, and I
mm,
guess diegetic music as well, like the jukebox in the bar.
yeah,
It's like a
yeah,
really big part both in the plot and also sort of in introducing musical
right.
themes to the show. Um, for you, like in that case, are you having to like figure out music that fits into that sort of milieu, or like how much of that particular series was written into the script itself?
There was a decent amount of music scripted for that. Tweety, one of the characters, the character that owns the bar, he plays bass, and that's part of his story. The story takes place in Detroit, so we wanted to, same thing as sort of LA, we wanted to make that a character in, we wanted to make sure Detroit sound came through. And then there's Menzel, who fancies himself a singer. And so, we open on him singing a White Stripes song. So that was all scripted. When my initial discussions with the showrunners, Michael and Dave, um, we we talked about Detroit being a sound that we really wanted to make sure we represent. And we didn't have Motown money, so we had to sort of go deeper cuts, find the gems. And we did find some really dope soul music that, wasn't Motown, but was from that time and had this really, really amazing sound. I was super excited about some of the tracks that we were able to feature on that show, given our sort of restriction budget wise. We had a lot of music in that show. I think way more than the original Justified series. So even Dave and Michael, who did the original and did City Primeval, were a little overwhelmed with how much music we ended up using and probably surprised at the amount that they put in there. But it was a super fun show to work on.
How did you come to working as a music supervisor? It seems like it is a career that requires a special level of like obsession.
Yeah. And okay, well, two different questions. There, there's the obsession, yes, for sure. Knowing a lot of music, knowing a wide range of music, you never know what type of music you'll be asked to do on a project. So it really, a broad knowledge is really helpful. And um, there's a lot to music supervision that I think people don't understand. That it's not just creative, it's very much the business side too. It's spreadsheets and numbers and licenses and negotiations. So in addition to the creative, you also have to have this other detail oriented side to you that not all creative people do have. So it is a special combination of skills that you need to have to do this job, which even I going to the field had no idea about. Um, and I got into it because I was working at a record label i- in the 2000s when it was a bad time to be working in the music industry. And the one bright light of our little indie label would be if we would land a sync and, all this money would come in, and these artists were so small that this sync could recoup their entire album. It was just such a bright spot in the middle of all the doom and gloom. And I had never even heard of music supervision. I didn't know that that was a job, but I found out then. And I was like, oh, I'd like to do that. My dogs, hold on one second, barking at me. Um, so I was like, I would like to do that. That sounds like a good job. How do I do that? And it happened at that time that Stephanie Diaz-Matos, who I still work with today, was a music supervisor on the come up at the time. She walked into my office wanting to get distribution for her husband. And so I met her and I was like, oh, I'd like to get to know more about what you do. And we developed a friendship and a kinship. And I ended up working for her late husband that at the time and let her know, this is what I wanted to do. And she taught me sort of the ropes. I'm still working with her to this day. So that's how I ended up in this field. It's very much an apprenticeship job. You may take a million music supervision classes, but until you are in it and you see all of the tiny little things that you just need to know, you really need to be working under a music supervisor for some period of time to learn the ropes, which is what I did and eventually started taking on my own projects.
It's thinking in terms of the detail oriented nature of that and like the little things I think people don't understand. It's like in the modern era, like there are shows that are beloved. Your WKRP in Cincinnati, I think, is like maybe the number one thing where it uses so many needle drops and things like that that it almost made it unreleasable on home video for years and years because they didn't think about that. It was fine for syndication,
Mhm.
not for home release or streaming. Like, are these the things that you're working in when you're negotiating this, like in terms of how much of the song can we use in this? How can we use it in advertising? How can
Yep.
we, what does it mean when it makes it to streaming or home video?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Those are the little things that we have to think about. A big part of it is negotiation because the music budget is fully your domain, and it is up to you to creatively deliver for the creatives, but deliver on budget for the studio or alert the studio when the budget is not working and let them know, like, you're probably going to need more money. So, negotiating is a huge part of it. They have since changed the deals that they do for music. So now they won't let that happen again, where shows can't now come out in a new format because when you clear a song, you clear it for all formats that are to come. So any media that is now known or hereafter devised is the term. So that when we go to like 3D or holograms or whatever the next form of entertainment is and media is, everything now in music will be able to transfer over to that medium as well. But yes, these are definitely the types of things that we have to think about.
So, I have to ask, in given the wide range of programs and things that you've worked on, is there a song that you've always loved that you were happy you were able to slot in? And I guess the other side of that coin is, what's your favorite song that you've discovered doing this job?
Hmm. Discovered is going to be really hard. There are so many. I think some of and actually it was on City Primeval, some of the soul songs that because like I said, I was digging pretty deep, just stuff that artists I'd never heard of, songs I'd never heard, and real gems that were super exciting to place. Actually, in City Primeval, the song I Can't Get Right by the Peps, either the Peps or the Pep Boys, that placement was, I loved it so much, and I loved that song too. And I'd never heard it before I started working on the project. It was one of my favorite finds. I still listen to it. Um, and as far as song, I actually just placed in a show that's not out yet, which I won't say what the show is because I don't want to like blow up their spot about. But I'm working on a show that's set in the 90s, which is like just a wonderful era. And I placed this song that I was obsessed with in my childhood called Black Velvet by Alana Miles. Love that song. So I'm super excited to have landed a spot for that song. When we just recently spotted the episode and I cheered when we got to it and the showrunner said we love this. I was like, yes, yes. I was like 10-year-old me is so excited. I can't begin to tell you.
That's so wonderful. So, what projects are you working on upcoming that you can talk about? I mean, like I feel like one of them days is due out very very soon, and it's going to
Yes,
it
this
seems
weekend.
I'm getting very excited about it. I mean, like SZA and Keke Palmer in an Issa Rae production is
The
like
movie, I just have to say, this is definitely the project I've been super excited for people to see because it is SZA, and I think people have a big question about mark around can she act? Is she going to be any good? And I'm here to say she is so good. She is a natural. The comedic chemistry and timing between Kiki and SZA is truly unmatched. I have seen this movie, obviously, of course, many times, and I laugh every single time. And I can't wait to see it again because I miss it because I haven't seen it since we finished it. And all the jokes are in my head. Like it's one of those that you just, it's definitely a new classic. It really is super exciting. I'm so excited for people to see it. So I have that. And then I have two shows that are done and coming out in the spring. Um, a show on Netflix starring Michelle Buteau. It's actually the second season. It's called Survival of the Thickest, based on her book of the same title, which is just, a fictionalized version of her living her life in New York City as a single woman and trying to make it work with her career. And it's got insecure vibes, but taking place in New York. It's very, very funny. Michelle is so funny.
her new special.
Absolutely love her. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Her specials are so good. She cracks me up. She is funny, just like in a meeting. She can't help but be funny. Like truly just laugh the whole time working on that show. I love that. And then I have on Peacock a show called Long Bright River, which is 180 Alert is a murder mystery starring Amanda Seyfried, based on the book of the same name. And it's extremely suspenseful. And I did not read the novel before I read the scripts. And so I was gagged. My jaw was on the floor as the murder mystery unfolded throughout. There are so many twists and turns. It's one of those where you're like, jaw on the ground when you find out what actually happened here is it's just quite shocking. So that one I'm super excited about too. Um, Survival of the Thickest is out March 27th on Netflix, and I don't have a date yet for Long Bright River, but I do know it'll be in the spring, so it'll be soon.
Wonderful. Well, Sarah Bromberg, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to me. This has been such a great conversation. I
Thank
can't
you for having me. I appreciate it.